The dust of the ranch yard clung to his boots as Matthew Reeves, a poor rancher barely in his 20s, stood before the gathering crowd. His head hung low, his heart heavy with humiliation. He had spent his life working cattle, fixing fences, and fighting to keep his late father's small ranch from collapsing into ruin. But now the debt was too deep, and the bank had nearly stripped him of everything. The only deal that could save him came with a condition: marriage. But not the kind of marriage he had dreamed of. No, Matthew was being forced into a union with Eleanor Whitfield, a wealthy widow twice his age, known for her stern face, cold eyes, and the reputation of being untouchable. The ranchers whispered among themselves, some with pity, some with mocking grins, as Matthew lifted his gaze toward the woman he was bound to wed. Eleanor was not the kind of bride he had imagined. He had once hoped for a young wife with laughter in her voice and fire in her spirit, someone to run across the meadows with him and share simple meals by the fire. Instead, he saw before him a woman draped in fine silks, her silver-streaked hair pinned high, her jewels glimmering in the Texas sun. To him, she looked more like a queen than a wife. And yet, beneath the weight of disappointment, there was something in her eyes, something deeper than the gossip suggested. She extended her hand with grace, though her lips did not smile, and when Matthew hesitated, she spoke softly. "You'll have more than a roof over your head, young man. You'll have a chance." That chance was enough for him to grasp her hand, though his heart trembled. The early days of their marriage were awkward and silent. Matthew worked the fields from dawn to dusk, while Eleanor, accustomed to wealth and order, stayed inside the grand Whitfield house that now also belonged to him. At night, they sat across the dinner table in silence, separated not by distance but by worlds. He thought she judged his worn clothes and rough hands, while she wondered if he despised her for the years that weighed on her face. But time has a way of softening walls. One evening, after a storm tore through the valley, Matthew returned soaked and weary, his shirt clinging to his skin, his arms bruised from wrestling broken fences. He expected criticism for dripping water across her polished floors, but instead Eleanor appeared with a blanket, wrapping it around his shoulders with quiet care. "You'll catch your death if you don't dry off," she said, her voice stern yet trembling. It was the first time he saw not the stern widow, but a woman who knew loss, who knew loneliness, and who had chosen him not out of cruelty, but out of need, perhaps even hope. As weeks turned to months, Matthew began to notice the ways she surprised him. She did not demand he abandon his ranching ways. Instead, she invested in his work, buying better cattle and repairing his tools. She rode out with him, her skirts tucked beneath her saddle, showing him that she wasn't just a woman of pearls but of strength. At night, she shared stories of her late husband, the struggles she endured when left alone, and the ache of wanting children she never had. For the first time, Matthew realized that though she was older, her heart carried wounds like his, and in that pain, they found something shared, something real. Slowly, respect turned into admiration, and admiration began to spark into something Matthew never thought possible: love. One summer evening, while lantern light flickered in the big house, Eleanor sat by the piano, her fingers dancing over ivory keys, playing a melody he had never heard. Matthew leaned against the doorframe, his chest tight, not from shame or duty, but from awe. She was radiant not because of her jewels or gown, but because she was alive in a way he had never allowed himself to see. He walked closer, his boots soft against the wood, and whispered, "You've given me more than land, Eleanor. You've given me a reason." She paused, her hands trembling above the keys, and when she looked up at him, her eyes shimmered with tears. For the first time she smiled, not the polite mask she wore for society, but a true smile filled with tenderness. By the end of that year, the whispers of the townsfolk had changed. Where once they mocked the poor rancher and the older widow, they now saw something stronger than they could explain. They saw a partnership. They saw devotion. Together, Matthew and Eleanor rebuilt not only his ranch, but each other. Their marriage was not a cage, it was a foundation, built from sacrifice, courage, and unexpected grace. And when Matthew stood again, in the same ranch yard, where his humiliation had begun, He was no longer the poor boy forced into marriage. He was a man, and beside him stood a woman who gave him more than he had ever dreamed. Not just wealth, not just security, but love that grew out of respect, trust, and the courage to see beyond what the world expected. Their story wasn't about age or circumstance. It was about how sometimes the gifts we least expect are the ones that save us. So if this story touched your heart, remember this: love doesn't always come in the form we imagine, but when it does, it can change everything. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. Stories of courage, faith, and the unexpected beauty life can bring. Your support means everything, and together we'll keep these stories alive.